Hello and welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Riffe-Gallery. Today we're going to have a look at the exhibition In Ohio, curated by Char Norman. Hi Char, how are you?
Hi Kat, I'm great.
So let's talk about this show. You used a specific thing to try and find all of these artists. Tell me a little bit about that and how helpful it's been.
I sure did. I used the Ohio Artist Registry. And it's just such a great resource because you can find artists from all over Ohio. You can read their bios, you can see their work, you can read their statements and choose from that. So it was such a pleasure to use that.
Yeah, so for folks that don't know, the Ohio Artist Registry is a platform hosted by the Ohio Arts Council, and it's a free resource that artists can use to share their work and connect with other artists and community and really establish an online presence. So it's really an important and really helpful, not just for curators, but also for artists. So this exhibition, having used that tool, is really a celebration of the talent of Ohio. So obviously, there were way more artists than what you can fit into this space. So this is a really small cross-section, but I think you did a great job of identifying, this great intersection of artists from different locations, just to give a real flavor of the talent that we have nascent to the state. And it's just incredible to imagine that this is a tiny representation of that.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I thought was really nice, and I'm sure you planned for this because you're one of those folks that think about all of the myriad things that come in, is, the time of year. It's spring, we're coming out of winter, and it's a joyful exhibition.
Yes, colorful and really eclectic in many ways. Just things are happening here. And as you said, we barely scratched the surface. In fact, I'm not even gonna say we scratched the surface. We more tickled it.
So should we talk about the artists?
Let's talk about the artists.
Do you want to start with Meryl?
Let's start with Meryl. This is Meryl Engler. She is an Akron artist. She's internationally known for her printmaking. And as a wood block printmaker, she uses these big pieces of plywood as her plates and carves them. And it's very physically demanding, huge pieces, but if you look closely, there's so much fine detail in these. So there's that play of the large piece, but very fine detail in her work. Her colors are amazing in that she does contrasting colors, which means she'll use a color that you don't expect to be over another one, like the blue leaves on top of the red branches, and it makes it really pop.
Char, we were talking a little bit earlier about not only the incredible talent and strength it takes to do such large wood blocks, but also that she uses a particular method of woodblock printing in this, and that some folks will continue to reduce a block, and it means that you can only use it really once, right?
Correct.
But these are multiple different blocks.
That's right.
Used together, right?
So what she does is she'll carve a block or the whole piece of plywood, that's her background, but then she takes other wood and carves pieces out of it. For example, the leaves on this one are carved separately and then added to, or the woman on this one is separate and added to. So she has multiple blocks that she is then reusing into multiple artworks.
And what you'll also see in this is that the background on these two are both they're the same. But by the artist choosing a different color and how they embellish and continue that work, it changes them extraordinarily.
Absolutely, yes.
And that gives us a really nice visual throughway to our next artist.
Yes. So as we walk over to our next artist, who is Frank Herrmann, first the thing that strikes me are the colors. They're similar, but these works are so different. Frank is from Cincinnati, and he is a painter, and he draws from his background as a professor in painting at the University of Cincinnati, but also his art history background, his travels to places like Indonesia, and he brings that all together in his work. So you see the backgrounds are almost landscape or even a skyscape, and then you have the figure in front, and that juxtaposition of the two, I think, is very, very interesting.
It's also abstract.
It is abstract, yes. And you can read what you want into it. The other thing that I think is very interesting is the texture in these. It's not flat. It's an impasto, which means the paint is very, very thick and applied sometimes with a palette knife or a large brush, and it builds up the surface.
It almost looks like encaustic up there.
It does, and it might actually be. He does use that. He uses all kinds of different things.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But it's something it's notable is that it almost looks like the top could be the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And it really begs introspection, like what does this mean and what is the perspective on this? So I think, you know, again, the colors just really attract me. They just pop. They're just beautiful.
Lovely. Well, let's go around the corner.
Let's do that. This is Janet Marsano, who is from Loudonville. The work is so interesting because it's a technique you don't often see. It's called scratchboard, and that literally means you have a board that's either covered in black ink or paint of some sort, and you scratch through the surface to create the image. So it's incredibly time-consuming. Just imagine taking a needle and making each of these little lines separately and then adding to it. So she has created these dreamscapes, things from her imagination, things that she thinks about in these incredibly intricate pieces. And then she doesn't stop there. She adds a third dimension by adding on top of it. So it's really pretty intricate. It's worth looking really closely at and finding all these things that she has going on within her composition.
It gives it almost a diorama feel.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I was chatting with Janet the other day, and she was talking about how, you know, in Loudonville, she lives on acres and acres of land, and, you know, the one constant is grass and all of the things growing that, you know, you have to continue to beat back so that you have a pathway. And a lot of that is the inspiration for, you know, all of the little things that you find in the grasses, and you can really see that place within her work, which I adore, having learned that little nugget of information. It just makes it so much more rich, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Really detailed, and these works are some of those works where it's the intimacy is because they are so detailed. You can't really look at this from very far away and get everything. You have to be up close and personal with them.
And you really have to look in the grass, and you see all these fun little things that you wouldn't notice otherwise.
Yeah, plenty of Easter eggs.
Right.
All right, let's go to our next artist.
This is Gavin Benjamin. He actually was born in Guyana, South America, and grew up in Brooklyn, but now resides and works in Columbus. And he's a photographer. He works in analog photography, which means not digital, old school, but then he combines collage and painting and drawing in that, and he references Baroque art in his work. And that's why you see the glitter and the jewels and all of this layering. And he's really talking about the experience as a colored person in this society today. So what is that like So you'll see a lot of things that make you wonder, like, what does that mean? Or why the snake on his arm? Or the panther? But it talks about strength and weaknesses and cultural references.
So, Char, a little bit of art history. What do you mean when you say Baroque?
From the Baroque period, which was known for very ornate architecture, painting, costumes, and Gavin does reference costuming a lot in fashion, but you would think about a woman in this heavily brocaded, jeweled gown. That would be a Baroque style.
Yeah. So Baroque was really about opulence.
Opulence, yes.
Absolute opulence,
and
like
ornamentation, and yes.
And what's lovely about these works is that they have a graphic feel to them. And what I notice in your curatorial view is that there are so many pieces in this show
Yes.
that have a collage sensibility. So look for that when you come to see the show.
I think that's really important. So many pieces are made up of smaller pieces put together.
And speaking of, we have a diptych over here.
Right.
So it's two smaller pieces that make one large.
Yes. This is Rod Hayslip. He's also a Columbus artist. This piece to me is so interesting because of his perspective. You don't usually look down on people crossing a street or a crosswalk, but this gives the feel of these people rushing around. I mean, you can feel it. You can feel the movement in this, and it makes you wonder, what's their narrative? You know, where are they going? What are they doing? Who is with whom? And you know, you just think about that. But again, that movement to me is so important. And then the use of the shadows too, give another dimension. But being a diptych, that means there's two pieces. He also does single pieces as well. But this one, I think the movement between one and the other is really important, and it really adds to it.
There's something interesting that happens here too, is that when you see these lines, they you know, infer the crosswalk, right? And so we carry that into this second piece. But then those lines stop, and the people stop being kind of contained by them. So they start
They're
to go
spreading out.
It's really interesting. Like as you take your time to review that, you're like, oh, okay. Is this a manhole cover? Maybe. Could be something else.
And is this person walking off? I mean, he's...
Or walking towards. We don't know.
We don't know. Yeah.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
All right. So that's an aerial view.
An aerial view. And here we have Jason Clary with a more traditional view of Cincinnati. He actually lives and works in Morrow County, or Morrow, Ohio, and he's a representational painter. So he's very classically trained and very skilled at depicting a scene to make you think or realize that it's real. He talks a lot about being an observational artist, and what that means is he's very carefully observing what he's painting. And through that observation, he's learning about what he's painting, really studying that and noticing things that maybe a viewer wouldn't necessarily notice unless you're really working at observing. So it's all about sight.
And so we were chatting a little bit earlier too, that this is done wonderfully in what we call atmospheric perspective. And so for folks that aren't familiar with what that is, things that are closest to us are going to have more chroma or more like vibrant color. And as things recede into space, they get grayer and there's less value contrast. So it's not like up here you see really dark darks and light lights next to each other and they pop forward. In the background you see, you're expecting that those are trees, but it's really kind of gray masses, and it's a wonderful way for that artist to signal that things are receding out into perspective. And then, Char, we were talking a lot as well about artists really enjoy, I mean, everyone does. Everyone loves the golden hour. And this is the golden hour.
Right. The golden hour means the lighting is just right. It spotlights different things. Again, you have that atmospheric perspective, but you have areas that are very, very bright, and it's like the perfect lighting for when you're observing or painting or drawing or whatever. It's just a beautiful time.
It's just that kind of window of time.
Yes.
That's kind of, and truly it is a little golden. You kind of see it raking over here and gives you these wonderful dappling of shadow against those buildings that just add interest, right? So,
Yeah.
and this is in Ohio.
Yes, the name of it is, yes, it's right. It's Cincinnati. Yeah, so in Ohio, definitely.
There we
but
go.
again, you know, it's little parts made up to make up the big part. So that's kind of, yeah.
And we have more Ohio.
Yes, yes. This is Stuart Pearl, who is a photographer. He has a long career in photojournalism, works in the Cleveland area. These pieces, I think, are so interesting because he's doing the underside of bridges, factories, close-ups, and they're very abstract. So we're looking at shapes and colors and angles that are so interesting to me. You don't need to know what it is or where it is. You can just enjoy what you're seeing here. And he's particularly interested in that. Really not telling a narrative necessarily, but reducing this to shapes and colors and angles.
There's something that Stuart's doing in these images that I think is also really important for a viewer to think about as they're viewing it, is that he is composing it for the viewer to have a good experience while viewing. So he's moving your eye around that piece.
Exactly, yeah.
And so you can do that really dynamically when you zoom in and give, you know, hints at where a location is and highlight those lights and darks. And, you know, this one keeps your eye
right
doing this. It's just a really interesting thing to observe.
You know, the use of angles, I think, leads your eye. Like your eye goes up here, but then it comes down. And this is, I want to call it a trick that artists use, and it is. It's a design tool that we use, but it leads your eye around.
But it keeps it contained. That's the other piece. Like,
that's right.
In this one, he breaks some rules by shoving off into this corner, but because there's such strong...
Yeah, it brings it right back in.
It's just really lovely. So,
yeah.
And these works have a great relationship to our next artist.
Yes.
You wanted these placed together.
I did.
Tell us about that.
Okay. Well, as we move over here to Jenniffer Omaitz, who is from Kent, Ohio, you see angles and you see shapes that directly relate to what Stuart has done. And she's an abstract painter as well, but she derives her paintings from architecture. And so there's a real relationship between what's going on between these two artists. And then you look at her three-dimensional piece, because she also does 3D. And again, you see those angles and those building pieces and architecture. It's almost like it's exploded. But it's the same sensibility.
There's something really interesting, that kind of juxtaposition of her three-dimensional work to her 2D work. This has so much more personal bits and pieces.
Yes.
So it's really interesting as you go in there. She's included pieces of herself. So she's also a DJ, so she has a little DJ set in there and some vinyls that she uses. But like, I think about how much I enjoy 3D models and you know, scaled things, because there's this opportunity to kind of flip yourself into a different perspective.
Right. And she talked a lot about the creation of this, and it is a lot to do with her home and her studio during COVID.
Oh.
And how she felt everything was out of whack. And you can really see that, you know, the odd angles and the perspective here. And she talked a little bit about creating some architectural models, which she then used to extrapolate her paintings from.
Oh, smart.
So she works kind of backwards almost. But again, these vibrant, vibrant colors.
And you'll see in this model, she has included pieces of her own paintings scaled down as well, which is a treat. And so, you know, we go from these photographs that abstract shapes, and then these shapes that speak about landscape to a degree, and then, you know, a more literal version with this composition. And it brings us over to our next artist.
Yes.
So again, you were really, really specific about wanting these
Right.
all in conversation. Tell us about that.
Okay, so these paintings are by Jolene Powell, who is from Marietta. And once again, you see those angles, you see sharp lines, but she's a landscape painter. So really very different from what Jenniffer does, but yet you see colors, shapes, angles that are reflected on the other two artists. Jolene is very concerned with environmental issues, so she's picking sites where humans have had some effect on the environment, and yet she's making it beautiful. Her depictions, you know, the colors and her layering of different shapes, you know, really depict beauty in these landscapes. And they are actual sites that she goes to and paints from, even though they depict a sense of mystery. And you can interpret them in different ways. Is this a desert scene? Is this the ocean? Is this mountain? So I think the viewer brings their own experience to these, what they are, or where they are, and what that all means.
So there's a bit of representation in that.
Yes.
And then we come to these bits of representation, which are also abstracted.
Yes. This is Richard Lillash, who is a Columbus artist, works primarily in interior scenes, still lifes. He does work from actual objects and places, but it's abstracted. The perspective is different. Things are flattened out, moved around. Very vibrant colors once again, which reflects everything else. But another thing that's really interesting about this is the texture. It's not just flat paint. He adds sand to his paint to give it these amazing textures. And you almost don't do it, but you want to run your fingers over it and touch it. But he also references things in his own studio and his life as a painter and what's that like and the tools he uses and you know, the different interior spaces that he works in.
It has a real strong tie art historically as well.
It does, yes. In fact, he references the Impressionists, which were known for their brush strokes, which is something that's very important to Rich, the way he works and the surface of the painting. And it's an impression of it. It's not realistic necessarily, although it is representational.
You know, it's so interesting that you mentioned the Impressionists. Like you absolutely see those paint strokes, but he has such angularity in his work as well. And so there's, again, this kind of callback to Jenniffer's work with that angularity.
Right.
It's just, I mean, this corner is just such a lovely conversation between all of these artists.
Absolutely.
And so then we come over to John. You want to talk about John's
John
work?
Kiser is, here's a very different piece. Again, it's a painting, but very realistic. He is creating the entire work out of little tiny bits and pieces where he's, you know, referencing the skin of this rhinoceros, but if you look carefully, it's individual shapes and it's pretty amazing. Again, you can almost feel the texture there,
yeah.
Even though this is a flat surface, but it certainly doesn't look like it. But he is known for the representational painting that he does and really the attention to detail.
Extraordinary detail.
Absolutely.
And we have a couple more pieces of his over here
Yes.
that are going to make you hungry.
That's right.
Reach you at the door over here. It's lovely.
So these pieces are also by John, and you can really see what he does here. He builds up layers of paint and glazes, which are transparent, over and over, but it makes you want to reach out and grab a section of this orange and just bite into it, and you can feel the juice just running down your chin. They're so magnificent, you know. It's just, and then his shadows and the play against the background, the black background is just wonderful, I think. Yeah. But again, the little shapes in there, that's what makes the painting. He's really paid so much attention to the detail, the colors and the shapes. And then again, as I said, building up these layers to create this magnificent representation of a juicy orange.
Then we'll come over to a vastly different
Yes, okay.
work.
This is so different. This was Edward Hallahan, who is from Youngstown, Ohio, and he's a sculptor, although these are mounted on a wall. We would call it a low relief, but they're wood, and he's referencing the verticality of trees and the human form in his wood, and he also talks about indigenous people and ancestors and how they use very totemic representations of their culture. So the pieces of wood, he puts these all together. He carves them, he strips the bark, it's all different kinds of wood, and then assembles it. And the way he does that is pretty interesting, because if you look very closely, you see little pegs that he's created to put it together. No nails or glue, it's all pegged. And that in itself is pretty remarkable.
The skill of the woodworking is pretty phenomenal.
And something that I love about this are the shadows they create too. You know, you've got a second tree behind it with the shadow.
There's something really kind of phenomenal about this work, in that you got to think about how much time did it take to collect the pieces of wood?
Exactly.
And did you have them in a space where, you know, you were waiting for the right piece to be collected to finish? You know, when you're working with found or sourced materials, oftentimes you have to amass quite a lot and understand that some of it will be used and some not. I mean, you're really familiar in your own work in that.
That's right.
And then, you know, identifying how you're going to put them together. There's such time and almost puzzle making with this work.
That's the way I see it. It's like a puzzle. And when you're working in this scale, you know, standing back and figuring out how it's going to fit together has that other dimension that makes it even more difficult. Yeah.
Really lovely.
Very
so
nice.
This is on a grand scale. And we'll come around the corner.
Yes.
Let's chat about Weiting's work.
Yes. This is Weiting Wei, and she is a Columbus artist. Again, little elements put together to do a whole installation. They're very delicate. She is talking about her experience as a mother and a woman, and she likes to equate the way she works, the tools she uses, the muscle memory that she has to make her art is very similar to what it is to be a mother and care for her children. So it's so delicate, and yet it's got so much strength to it. And that's something I really love about her work. You know, you want to really test the strength and know that it's there, but yet you can tell it's very, very delicate.
The other bit that's really relational to Edward's work is you can see the time.
Yes.
There's no way that you could imagine that this work wouldn't be created over many, many hours.
Right, absolutely.
And so there's a reverence in that too.
Yes, I mean, it's almost like a meditation or, I don't know, a worship of your process. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And then again, this one doesn't have those bright colors, and it's just as effective, you know, all the subtleties of the grays and whites and dark tones and light tones in there.
And there are a couple more pieces by Weiting that you'll have to come and see for yourself. And Weiting's work is bracketed by Michael Shearer's work.
Yes.
So maybe we have a little look. Do you want to
let's
pass
look at
through these? Yeah.
Yeah, let's have a look at these. Michael Shearer is from Cincinnati, and he's known for his collage work. But he's such an interesting artist. He has dealt with fashion and printmaking and painting, and he gets all of those together. He references many times from art history. You'll see little things in here that might be a textile, a Venetian textile, or you'll see a little bit of things like in here, the colors are from pop art. And so you have to really get up close and personal with these and start picking out those things. And yet he is able to bring it all together into a cohesive composition. And it really begs a close look at it and imagining what it could be, what it means to you as the viewer, and where did these parts and pieces come from? So.
Then there are these lovely 3 additional works by Michael that play so well with Margarita's work. We'll finish with that and then talk about the importance of that kind of conversation.
So these are a little bit different in that they're not quite as loaded with layers of things. He's now using some ink as his backgrounds and then very carefully placing his parts and pieces on top of it. But again, you can see the reference to pop art and some historical references in here. And then if you stand back and look at that, you look at Marguerite's and you're seeing the same colors and you're seeing these pops of color in here. So let's talk a little bit about Margarita. Vilshanetskaya. She's a fiber artist, but not a traditional fiber artist. She is drawing from her Eastern European roots in a family who was in the textile field and fiber field, and now as an American, she's trying to bring those cultures together. But something that's so important to her is the tactile quality. But once again, this is a piece, it's large, but it's made up of little individual things. Like all of these pieces of yarn are tied into a background. I mean, there must be 10,000 knots in this piece. And it just holds together as this beautiful installation. And these colors are pretty magnificent.
She does a phenomenal job of color mixing within the piece. So something that I love about Margarita's work, you can see it really apparently here. When you come up close, well, from far away, this looks like a really easy transition from yellow to green. But if you get up close, you'll notice that there's blue in there that is visually mixing to give you a softer green from far away. And I just think it's important for us to recognize those talents being utilized.
I agree.
I mean, you could very easily skip that and it wouldn't be as powerful a piece. There are these kind of little trade secrets that she's utilizing that aren't really secrets. They're just, tricks of the trade within fabric work, fiber work, textiles that are really important. The clothing that we wear and how color mixes to make that clothing. This is all coming into play. That also the inclusion of paper and
kind of a plastic here.
Yep.
But the other thing I like is that she's created these shapes within each piece, and that again is with her color mixing and the length of those pieces of yarn. Yeah,
so there's some patterning that's happening in there with the pile. Yeah, it's just, and you notice both Char and I were, touching our own fingers while in front, because it's such tactile work. You really want to touch it. You want to just put your hands in there. So you just rub your fingers in front of it and you're fine.
Absolutely. Yes, it's a beautiful piece.
Yeah, and I bet it does feel really good to feel the difference between the yarn and the paper and plastic that she has interspersed as these kind of reflective bits. It's a nice additional color mixing that's happening. So, what a treat.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we'll finish on another Michael, which is just over here. We have two Michaels in the show, and both of them do some really great works with collage.
That's right. Now, this is Michael Rosen. He's from Glenford, Ohio. I kind of think of him as a Renaissance man because these are beautiful collages, but he also does ceramics. And he has authored and illustrated a number of books. And he works with the Thurber House and just does all kinds of things. But that shows up in his collages too, because these are not just parts and pieces that he's cutting up. He creates each of these. He paints pieces of paper and then cuts it. He prints on it. He just does all different kinds of things. So he's actually creating each little element before he uses it in his collage.
He's collaging his own work.
Exactly, exactly. So you see a tremendous amount of texturing going on that he's done with prints. Creating all different kinds of plates that he uses, whether it's styrofoam scratching into it and printing it, or linoleum plates, or what have you. But then he puts them into these fabulous compositions. Again, I have to reference the color. The color is great. Even the black and white one is so many shades of gray in there. It's so rich.
I also enjoy his titles. They're descriptive, but then you have this title, which is Bird Vase, Fruit, and Overbearing Wallpaper.
Yes,
It's
I think that's
just
great.
A treat, right?
That's great.
So this was our last artist, and I just want to invite you all to come and have a look in Ohio to experience just a smidgen of the phenomenal talent that is here in this state. Again, this is the exhibition in Ohio curated by Char Norman. I want to give a big thank you to the governor, the legislature, and the Ohio Arts Council's board for supporting the Ohio Arts Council, this great space, and of course, Ohio artists.